I'm very excited to introduce a panel that represents the worlds of politics, of business, of student engagement, and of land management, and the world of NGOs. And many of our panelists actually dance across all of those borders. So not only are they multidisciplinary, they're also interdisciplinary. And I think that's going to bring some very, very interesting insights. And we also have, I'm delighted to say, a sort of intergenerational panel, which I'm hoping as well will generate some diverse reflections. So as I look at the screen, first of all, I'm seeing Councillor Sally Longford, who is the representative for Lenton and Woollerton East, Deputy Leader of Nottingham City Council and the portfolio holder for Energy, Environment and Waste. I discovered that she's a keen vegetable grower and market gardener, a former geography student at the University of Nottingham and a former geography teacher in Nottingham at a sixth form college. She joined Nottingham City Council in 2011. Next to Heather Devey, who is, if I can describe you, a sort of environmental entrepreneur who set up a marvelous organisation that I have a huge amount of respect for, called Wild Intrigue, which leads mini expeditions in the Newcastle upon Tyne area. She blends together nature, people and food, which, let's face it, is most of my big passions all combined in one. And she stresses the local. She also, Heather, works with the RSPB at Haweswater and has worked as well with the Cumbria Beaver Project up there in the northwest. So Heather tracks across from the northeast to the northwest in her work. Undergraduate degree from Cumbria and a forest ranger and an ecological surveyor. Michael Walker is the nature recovery manager for Notts Wildlife Trust. After a 30+ year career in retail, he joined the trust in 2012 and is hugely involved in monitoring schemes, in project management, in countryside stewardship schemes, and is taking a lead on the Beaver project at Idle Valley with Notts Wildlife Trust. I'm delighted to say, and Heather will be excited about this, that Michael is also a passionate bat person and has been chair of Nottinghamshire Bat Group since 2008, and he's also the county mammal recorder for Nottinghamshire. So again, truly embedded in local ideas of nature and sustainability. And finally, to someone who I've got to know pretty well over the last year, which is Martha Roberts. Martha is studying zoology at the University of Nottingham, is the current University of Nottingham SU Environment and Social Justice Officer, and is looking after one of the greenest universities in the country and driving forward campaigns and student engagement and networks, and in particular the Sustainability Week that we have in March. And they also chair the Environment and Social Justice Network. And I am very delighted to say that Martha has recently, I noticed, just had a meeting with the Nottinghamshire Hedgehog Committee, which again shows the way that the university is really driving forward a sustainability agenda. I've asked each of the 4 panelists to do a positioning statement somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes about what their personal and professional engagement is with this overarching, almost impossible to define concept of sustainability. And I hope that this will then lead into some very interesting discussion and engagement around personal and professional connections to this term. So if I could please ask Sally to deliver her positioning statement, that would be much appreciated. And other panelists, let's turn our microphones off.
Thanks very much, Rob, and thanks very much for inviting me to the conference. As you said, I was a student at Nottingham University, but I am a Nottingham local as well. So I studied at Nottingham as a mature student, and that was in my 30s after I'd already had children, and I've become increasingly aware of how the world was changing around us and increasingly concerned. And when I was studying at Nottingham, I realised that the most enjoyable part of my life there was the teaching, and I couldn't get enough of that, which is why I went to teach in a sixth form college, and that was hugely rewarding. And I had no intention at all of becoming a politician. Although I'd been involved in Labour politics all my life, I stood in a so-called unwinnable seat, and once I won, I realised that actually there was quite a lot I could contribute. And I became a full-time councillor in 2014 when I retired from teaching. I care very much about the city and its people, and I'm a firm believer in that you can think local, global, and act local, and that's what keeps me going, really. Being responsible for the environment and being deputy leader is fairly uncommon in the UK, but it really makes a huge difference because people do actually take a bit more notice of deputy leader than they do of the average councillor, and it raises the profile of the issues locally, and it gives me a platform to speak at events like this and many others, and it sets the tone for the administration. It shows that the council really cares about the environment because it gives one of its top people this responsibility. And it gives me the opportunity of being in a room talking about all sorts of city related activity and always reminding people that they must think environmentally. So it doesn't always make me popular, but it helps get the job done. And in 2019, I pledged that we'd be a carbon neutral city by 2028, which is an earlier date than anybody else was going for at the time, because I was confident that we were already in a position which was ahead of most other cities. And so I thought that it could be done, and I still think it can be done, but it's not easy. At the heart of our action plan is a just transition, because we have a large proportion of our population who live in deprived communities and are very vulnerable. And it's my responsibility not just to ensure that we reach our targets and achieve carbon neutrality and improve the sustainability and the biodiversity of the city, but also to support local people in becoming more resilient, and helping to protect them from the worst impacts of climate change and improving their quality of life. Many of our citizens are too concerned with putting food on the table and keeping their kids in decent clothes, to spend time worrying about degrees of warming. But when we can help them reduce their energy bills by insulating their homes, or when we can provide them with a cleaner environment with good quality air and nice, attractive, natural areas to spend their time, then it helps us all. The plan includes many objectives which are, very positive. And the council can't do it alone. We have to work with a variety of partners to achieve that, and it's not an easy path. I can point to a lot of progress that we've made, but there are difficulties of culture and understanding to overcome along the way. Not everybody gets it, although I think we all know that since the pandemic, there's been a great deal of acknowledgement of how important contact with nature is for everybody's mental health, and therefore it's the right time to push for greater progress, particularly in the environment and biodiversity. And I think lots of local authorities have been wedded to the idea of green spaces being mown to within an inch of their life, and lots of spraying of weeds and now that there is a recognition that that has to change, and quite a lot of local authorities, including Nottingham, are actively involved in that transition. Another issue that's difficult to manoeuvre, of course, is the lack of resources in local government. So we have to engage with everybody in the city and try to engage with different organisations that can support our work. And since we made the pledge to be carbon neutral by 2028, we've had a lot of support from a wide variety of different organisations, and lots of small and medium-sized businesses too are signing up to be carbon neutral by 2028, which is very positive, and it's at the heart of our post-COVID recovery plan. So there's a lot to do, and it's very tough, but we are making progress with lots of different biodiversity projects across the city. One thing we do have to do is engage with more local people, and of course COVID has hampered our ability to do that, but I do feel very optimistic about the future at the moment, and it's my job to keep talking to as many people as I can about what we're doing and trying to engage with a wide variety of people to get the message across how vitally important it is.
Right. Thank you very much, Sally. If I could now ask Heather to give her positioning statement and reflections, please.
Okay. So as Rob touched on, I graduated in wildlife conservation at the University of Cumbria in 2012, which feels like a long time ago now. And at that point, I thought the best kind of route to a sustainable life, I suppose, was to go into the ecology sector. But working as an ecological consultant at that time, where you're supposed to be kind of re-establishing wildlife and helping wildlife, to me, it kind of felt like I was contributing to the depletion of natural resources a little. I was helping to fragment those natural habitats and removing species from where they were into other locations where they just simply wouldn't survive. That was my personal experience anyway. And the problem with that is that it was incredibly disenchanting. And that's kind of the word that I keep coming back to when it comes to wildlife and it comes to sustainability and natural resources. Even those key words there, they're not very enchanting. So I left that job and decided to bring the enchantment back to nature and to wildlife in the north. And I mean, we hear a lot of keywords like, you know, we all have climate anxiety, I imagine. There's the climate crisis going on. You hear Insectageddon. And these are all really vital things that we do need to focus on. But for me, I feel that it's very important that we keep that enchantment and magic for nature alive so that people aren't feeling too daunted by it and that they feel that there is something positive to protect out there. So I sat down in the woods one day and I thought, so what do I want to do? What do I want my place in this world to be? And I thought, well, I want to inspire people about wildlife. I want to educate them about wildlife and I want to rewild them. We all need a little bit of rewilding. And that is the kind of philosophy behind Wild Intrigue. So I established Wild Intrigue in 2014 and we've had a long winding journey to this point that we're at today, and we're still in our infancy. But now we're a community interest company. And the whole point of us really is to actually bring that enchantment back. So very, very long story short, there's a very small team of us, 2 people. But this summer we're due to bring out currently just over 800 people to direct wildlife experiences in the north of England. That's spreading across from the northeast coast right up to the northwest. But we found a unique way to lure them out into nature. So I do work for a wildlife conservation charity as well. And we find it quite difficult at times to bring people out and to actually get those connections to nature, to get people passionate about saving our natural resources. So we thought, well, what does everybody love? What is it? Everybody loves pizza, right? So we thought, yeah, everybody loves pizza. what's a species that gets kind of a bit of a bad rep? Bats. And so our bats and pizza nights were born. That was our very first mini expert. And every single year we have waiting lists as long as my arm with lots of angry families who can't actually book onto them, which is brilliant. So we're using these kind of pop culture foods to lure people out. We've got our bats and pizza nights, our kittiwake and donuts on the quayside. We've got moths and muffin mornings, bats and brownies. We've got a picnic in the meadow with James Rebanks on Racy Gill Farm. We've got breakfast with red squirrels in the Lake District. All of these things just to help lure people out just that little bit into wildlife, and it works. So it's really important to us that we rewild people. You know, it is all good fun. The names of them are really good fun, but when they get there, we do have a quite strong message that, you know, the wildlife that we're seeing here is absolutely amazing and it's on our doorstep, and it's this simple that you can help us to protect it. You can put up a bat box. Here's the link. Here's our contact at the Bat Conservation Trust. You can support the kittiwakes by joining our campaign with the Tyne Kittiwake Partnership. You can come to, we've got a kittiwake gig actually, our very first kittiwake gig. You can join our kittiwake gig and raise your voice for the kittiwakes, our lovely Geordie kittiwakes. So by rewilding people, we're finding that if we continue that on social media and having a really good, strong social media presence, we're continuing that message to get out there and look for our local wildlife, and for people to realise that their voice does really matter. So as well as doing all of those fun things, those mini experts, we engage with local landowners. So as I say, we work with James Rebanks, the shepherd and author in the Lake District, quite closely. We do moth trapping and bat surveys and lots of lovely things with him. And because he's got quite an influential voice, we've been able to reach out and branch out into other smaller local landowners. And essentially that helps to create a network of these incredible kind of really passionate landowners who are really passionate about their culture and their cultural heritage, but they're a little bit afraid to delve into the natural history side of things. So we're there to support them, to have those open, honest discussions and to say, we're here to help, basically. So we work with landowners like that. We work with the local council. So, for example, the North Tyneside Council currently, who have had, long story short, quite a big situation with kittiwakes on one of their areas. So the last kittiwake colony in North Shields it was supposed to be dislodged, but they've just nested on top of the netting, which is brilliant. And we're working with the council now to help them establish a Tyne Kittiwake partnership plan. Again, just reaching out and branching out and saying we're here to help. But kind of the key to all of this for us has been having really honest, open conversations, being truthful to people, not hiding the facts. It's the same in my role with the Cumbria Beaver Group. It's the same with my role in diversification with RSPB Haweswater. Being honest has been absolutely key. And also, we follow the philosophy of shy burns getting out. So if we don't actually ask the council to change their policy around the kittiwakes, it just won't happen. If we don't get in touch with landowners and say, why don't you consider just re-establishing this section of hedgerow, we can help you, it just won't happen. So at the end of the day, really, that's kind of what I believe, that if we're going to help our natural resources on a local level, we have to work together and be honest, but shy burns getting out, you have to ask away for help.
Thank you very much. Michael, if I can take you beyond mammals and marshmallows, could I ask you to please offer up your positioning statement? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to be booking on all of those and moving to the northeast.
Oh, just fantastic, isn't it? Bats and brownies. Definitely.
Well, how do I follow that wonderful message? Similar to start with, sustainability and nature recovery, in my view, are inextricably linked. It's a link that sadly many people don't make today. And it's easy to see why, as we live in one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. People have lost their connection to nature. They don't sort of value nature because they don't experience nature. Again, it's a totally alien concept to myself, and I imagine to Heather as well. You know, I spend pretty much all of my waking hours in doing something wildlifey. That could be in a wood chasing dormice or bats. It could be in my garden where I'm trying to up the bee species list, chasing around bees in my garden with a macro lens to identify yet another species for my seem to be rapidly growing list. And it's that reconnection and restoring our connection to wildlife that is a vital part of the Wildlife Trust's work. All wildlife trusts, not just Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. So all 47 of us are trying to do that. As a movement, we're calling for at least 30% of our land and sea to be connected and protected for nature's recovery by 2030. Because 30% is the bare minimum that nature needs to start recovering. As nature recovers, people experience it more. They value it more. They see the benefits of nature. But we need more help for this to happen. So to help us achieve these particularly ambitious goals, we want to inspire at least 1 in 4 people here in Nottinghamshire to take action for wildlife at home, at work, at school, in the neighbourhood, wherever. Our flagship reserves are going to be really important in this. So our flagship reserves at Attenborough and the Idle Valley are extremely effective engagement resources and will be a really important factor in meeting our goal to connect people to nature. But public engagement comes with an environmental cost, especially when you're building structures, visitor centres, car parks, that sort of thing. At Attenborough, when we looked to establish a nature centre in the early 2000s, we were really conscious of that need to demonstrate a commitment to sustainability when constructing our flagship facility. Wherever possible, we use low impact materials, including high quality double glazed windows, sustainably sourced oak cladding and decking, and materials with a long service life, things that wouldn't need to be replaced for a very long time. And in terms of energy efficiency, we worked with architects and construction partners to build in as many off-the-peg sustainable technologies as possible. So our heating there is boosted by a water source heat pump. We've got photovoltaic panels on the roof, all providing electricity into the grid. These technologies, when we put them in 2005, were off the shelf, tried and tested, but we were really surprised at the impact that it made and the publicity that it got. It seems that we were one of the first locally publicly accessible buildings to incorporate many of these technologies and highlight how it could be used. So we were considered a bit of an exemplar at the time on that. And when we began to work with our partners in the north of the county at North Notts College, when they came to build the Idle Valley Rural Learning Centre, which we share with them a few years ago, we adopted most of the same sort of approaches and specifically purchased land outside the SSSI, just on the edge of the SSSI. The whole of the reserve is practically SSSI. We got land away from that, so used some low-grade land to put this visitor facility directly adjacent to the nature reserve. But as a nature conservation charity, our objective is always to work as sustainably as possible and to limit our contribution to climate change. But maintaining 49 nature reserves covering nearly 1,300 hectares, that can be challenging, but we try to use the most energy efficient methods available where possible. The use of natural processes, sort of cattle and sheep, to manage a good proportion of our land avoids the use, in many cases, of diesel-powered tractors, but brings with it the issues of livestock-produced emissions, which is a major contributor to climate change. We keep these emissions to a minimum by using hardy, rare breeds, which can live outside in the winter and only require very minimal supplementary feed. And the majority of that supplementary feed we produce ourselves from our species-rich hay meadows. So the arisings from those, the hay from those, feeds our cattle during the winter. So we don't have to buy unsustainably produced commercial cattle feed or sheep feed. Cattle will be increasingly used on our larger nature reserves to shape the habitat, which will reinstate the natural processes, which in turn leads to more sustainable and biodiverse landscapes to help nature recover. And in the near future, we hope that our sheep and cattle will be joined by beavers to do what beavers do on the Idle Valley, our largest wetland reserve. We've recently begun a carbon reduction initiative. Again, I believe this is a whole Wildlife Trust initiative, and within Nottinghamshire we're embracing it fully, and we're looking at all aspects of the Trust's work as to how we can reduce our impact on the planet. You could say that our reserves offer a significant carbon capture opportunity, and they do, but at present we're only looking at emissions. It would be very, very easy for us to sit on our backsides and say, well, look at all the land that we've got absorbing carbon. We don't really need to do anything. We're practically carbon neutral already, and then not take impacts that with the stuff that we can do. You know, whether that's to do with transport, heating, turning our cameras off during a Zoom conference, as I've just learned today, would be a major change. So, in summary, as with every organisation or individual, we can do more to reduce our impact. We can do more to encourage people to engage with nature, which in turn leads them to reduce their impact when they've got that link to sustainability and nature recovery as being linked wholeheartedly. You can't separate the two. So, and we've already begun changes to lessen our footprint.
Thank you very, very, very much. Can I now ask Martha to talk about personal and professional interactions with the idea of sustainability?
Yes, I'm afraid mine's probably not going to be nearly as interesting as any of the other ones, haven't been in this as much, but I first got in, I realized kind of sustainability, environmentalism and social justice, the whole hog I realized it was my thing at university. Originally it's because I had an interest in historical fashion and tailoring. So I was learning about all the history of how people use clothes and the idea and culture around how fabric was treated and hailed as, and pieces were passed down and altered, and it was all naturally sustainable because just we didn't have this massive fast fashion industry. So that got me thinking, and then it kind of led to this, I suppose. This year I worked on 2 large projects, the Anti-Capitalist Winter Fair. Mainly I wanted to involve a lot of societies that aren't usually involved in the ESJ, and focus more on the social justice element, because a lot of people look at us and think just environmentalism and that it's not for us, when not for them, and it doesn't represent them, when really sustainability obviously represents everyone. And Sustainability Month, which is usually a sustainability week, but we had some scheduling conflicts, and so I decided to stretch it for the month, and hopefully that would bring a bit more engagement, which turned out to be a good idea. I pat myself on the back for that one. So a lot of societies engaged with the ESJ, and a bunch of new students interacted with everything, like the events we were doing and all the stuff we were doing on social media. And it was actually really good to see. I was really surprised because student engagement overall during the pandemic has been really low. That was something I really wanted to work on this year, was specifically with social media, and have a really noticeable brand, and also stuff that people enjoy seeing. So I kind of used my experience of seeing how young people engage on social media to kind of use that. And just overall, I'm really surprised about people's willingness to go out their way to contact me, to ask questions, get involved. I've had like a surprising amount of student groups, not necessarily societies, but groups of students in wanting ESJ and SU support for sustainability projects that they were working on and they wanted to incorporate into their degrees, which is really good to see that people were thinking of these really innovative ways. So generally, like, I think I'm very optimistic about the student body, although I'm of the belief that every year there isn't a greater number of activists or those who go out of their way to act. I just think because that's a personality thing, it doesn't really change year to year, but generally the people are more knowledgeable and are more aware of sustainability, environmental and social justice issues. Like, people have really keen and passionate about them, which means you kind of can get the ball rolling a little bit easier, which I'm very glad about. And I think at least most people would mildly inconvenience themselves for a good cause, I hope. I think the future of the ESJ position, I've been trying for the past 2 years with multiple other people, and I expect I will be shouting in my successor's ear until he's sick of it that the ESJ needs to be a full-time position because it has so much work. Ideally, I'd have a team, a team of people acting my will, because it's such a large job, and we really do try to do the best while still doing our degrees, but we've been trying for ages to get it to be a full-time position, because I think that would just do the university and hopefully the local community a lot of good. As for me in general, is, as I said, this is my passion. I want to keep working on social justice and sustainability, and that's what I care for and what I have my main drive for. My passion mainly is I want to work with local community projects that benefit everyone. I think that's where we need to go forward. That just aligns with my politics personally and what I just believe is correct, the correct way to do things. I'm holding an offer at the moment for a master's in sustainability studies at the Uni of York. So that's what I'll be doing next year, granted I get the grades. Yeah, so I'm going to keep doing the same thing because it's what I want to do. And whether it's professional or personal, I will be kicking and screaming after large corporations who are just annihilating our environment. Yeah, as I said, whether personal or professional, I will get my comeuppance. They will get their comeuppance, rather.
Okay, right.
I will in some way, yeah.
Thank you very, very much. As I expected, we got some lovely multi-generational reflections there. People who've worked in this for some decades, and people like Martha who've led from the front at the university and are now bursting out into the workplace and pioneering new ideas. This may seem an odd question to ask now, and you would imagine I would be asking it at the end, but I think this should be actually at the forefront of our thinking. I'd like to ask the panel, perhaps starting with Heather, about what they think the pandemic has done to change our thoughts on the idea of sustainability. How has it shifted our thinking?
I think that throughout the pandemic, we were all forced to stay locally, and through Wild Intrigue alone, we received so many inquiries about what's this bug, what's this bird that I can hear in my garden. People were really starting to connect because they were forced to connect with local nature. And I do think that that's still in play to some extent. However, I have acknowledged that quite a few people are readily rebooking flights, and they're traveling further in their cars just to get that sense of escapism. And obviously the fuel consumption and the carbon impact that this has, that I think it shows that there still isn't that connection between local nature and local I don't know, green spaces.
Local futures, yeah.
Yeah, local futures, exactly. And the sustainability, that kind of interlinking that Michael was talking about, I don't think that people have quite acknowledged that they can have such a big impact. And I have actually noticed where I work, in particular at Haweswater, a heck of a lot of extra fly camping and a lot of disrespect, I suppose, for the green spaces that we do have. So I was very hopeful throughout the lockdown period that attitudes were starting to change and slightly shift toward nature, but I'm a little bit uncertain now whether that will remain, personally.
Thank you. Michael, can I ask you, do you think we've now emerged into a rather confused state of affairs as regards local natures, local futures because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite positive at the start of the pandemic. People seem to come out. Our nature reserves have never been busier. And that always creates issues, but high footfall is not a problem. It's just an issue that needs dealing with. My optimism was that people are becoming more connected with nature. And I was thinking that right up until about a month ago. I got reconnected with a local site. So I wasn't going to, unless I had to go for work reasons, I was staying local. I wasn't taking the car out. I live very close to a, call it country park, and I'd go for a walk on there, somewhere that I'd really become disconnected from for various reasons. But I was going there every day, and I could see, I reconnected with the place, listening to the spring birds and all of that kind of thing. And I was hoping other people were doing the same, and I'm sure quite a few were. I think we've got to do a good job to keep these people now, to keep people's connection. But sadly, as soon as the restrictions were lifted a little recently, it's been the littering, the dumping, the barbecues everywhere, people carrying stuff down to have a party but not taking it back with them. So that connection of nature, again, they're not seeing that connection, how they're impacting the wildlife of an area and the environment and other people's connection with it. So I don't know, I think I'm still reasonably positive that we'll probably come out of this with a more nature aware population, but I don't think it's going to be as much as I'd hoped for this time last year.
And Sally, could I ask you to reflect, has the political will changed around sustainability because of the pandemic?
I think the political will has shifted, but I agree with what's been said by Heather and Michael. I think that there are swings and roundabouts here. We've always had for many years a really good sustainable public transport system in Nottingham, and low car usage relative compared to other cities. And of course, during the pandemic, people were advised not to use public transport. And I'm very concerned that since lockdown, although the usage of public transport started to creep back up again, I'm concerned that some people who previously were happy catching the bus or the tram will have found out the car is really convenient and they're not going to shift back. So that's one of my big concerns in the long term. But I do think there are people who certainly connected more closely with nature. And I think, as Heather said, people were engaging closely with their own environment and spotting birds and creatures that they'd not noticed before. But I think the idea that it was going to make a huge make a radical change to people's attitudes and daily lives, it was a bit optimistic, I think, and I was similarly optimistic at the beginning.
And can I ask Martha, could you jump in and reflect on, has there been a change in student connection to these concepts and ideas because of the pandemic?
I think yes. It's been very difficult for us because obviously most of us are stuck in student accommodation that has very little outside space. So I have noticed people craving it in that sense, but also with the increased internet usage and also increased, I think, just social awareness that comes with spending all of your waking hours on the internet. Maybe not the healthiest thing, but people are becoming, to use your word, Heather, disenchanted, or at least disenfranchised with greenwashing and that those kind of companies and those efforts. And I think I've seen definitely an uptick in people realizing that this stuff is really quite rubbish. And I know there's a bunch of people that I know personally, just in my personal life, that have kind of come to this realization by being exposed to so much internet, because we don't have the choice to go outside, and also with just the changing social climate during the pandemic, especially with, I won't get into that, but yeah, so people are realizing kind of how, at least how the, not necessarily how the right way to do things are, but definitely what is wrong, which is the commodification of the environment and greenwashing and such. And I know at least my partner, who's a student, he was a bit of a I'm glad he's not watching it downstairs. A bit of a loner inside, and at least either through the pandemic or through my influence, I like to think. We spend a lot of time outdoors and really enjoy it and watch the birds and learn what they're called. And it's not really on the insect front, but I like the insects, so I'll teach him about them. So yeah, I think swings and roundabouts, as Sally said.
No.